All right. So, what questions did we get from the fans?
Well, this one
which are the best questions, by the way?
Well, from your number one fan, me. And this
Okay.
is the question that I forgot to ask on the last episode, and you insisted I ask on this one. Which wrestler had the most illegitimate kids?
The most illegitimate kids that I know of, I would have to say, I believe, Jamie Dundee, without a doubt. It was Bill Dundee's kid. I think he had about 12 illegitimate kids. No kidding, 12. Because I know he was paying child support for a couple, and then he couldn't afford them after a while. So he didn't have a job. So what are they going to base it on? But he had kids everywhere. They were all over the place. And I went, what are you doing, Jamie? Well, you know, and you talk about a guest you want on the show, get Jamie Dundee. He would burn you up. He's got more stories. If you took a trip with him, you don't have to say nothing. He'd ask himself his own questions and he would answer them, and you just sit there and listen to it. He's his own podcast without having a co-host. He's hilarious, you know, and I love the kid. I've known him since he's like 10. You know, one time I was in Charlotte, me and my wife, and we pulled up at this red light, and a car pulled up beside me. And Jamie then was only like 13, 14. And a car pulled up beside me, and it was Jamie Dundee driving his dad's car. And I looked over him and I went, what the hell? And he looked over and saw me and went, oh my God. I said, roll your window down. I said, what are you doing? And he's got a deep voice, had a deep voice. Then he went, I'm going to the store. And I told him, I said, this is the best thing you can do. Excuse me. Take that car back home and park it right now. And he did. And he didn't tell me till like 20 years later that he kept waiting for his dad to beat him up because he knew that I had told Bill about him driving the car, but I never did. So he said, you always got over with me because you didn't tell my dad I drove the car. So he said he went home that day and he's waiting, for his dad to say something. Dad didn't say nothing. He said, oh God, he'll tell him today and I'll get it today. But I still didn't tell him. And then after a couple of days went by, he said, well, maybe he didn't tell him, but I never did. And he never got punished for it. He said, and you was over with me, he said, after you didn't tell him that I drove the car. And he said, I never expected you. He said, I expected you to tell him, but you didn't. So, but Jamie Dundee would be a great guest on this show.
He would be a terrifying guest.
Well, if you had an hour podcast, he'd take an hour 20 in his introduction. So, but he's entertaining and you don't know what he's going to say or how he's going to say it, or he's liable to say anything. He's a powder keg. He's on fire. And that's natural. That's just the way he is.
With Jamie, I think it gets overlooked because he's done a few interviews and, you know, he said quite a lot of things that probably get more press than what he's done in wrestling. But he's got a ton of great stories. But also, can you give me like a summation of him as a wrestler? Because I actually saw him more on WWF TV wrestling, and he was great. He was a great weaselly little bad guy that you just wanted to see beaten up.
I think if WWF had taken the time with him and Wolfie and gave them some airtime and worked with them, because the character, it doesn't need a tweaking. It just needs an airing. And let him go out there, and I would take the writers away from him. You said, you can't write anywhere close to what this guy is. Let him tell him what you want, but then let him do it, and you'd get him over, because he would get over. See, they put him with, I think, the Nation of Domination, and they kind of covered him up, and He's got a story. One time he was late to some pay-per-view, not just a TV. He was late for a pay-per-view. And then he got off the plane and got a cab. And then when he got there, he didn't have any money. So he went inside to try to see if they could give him like whatever, $80 or whatever it was. And he raised so much hell that Vince got mad at him. So when he got paid for the pay-per-view, and if you had him on your show, he could probably tell you, he only got like $100 for the pay-per-view because he got mad at him because he caused such a disturbance at backstage at the pay-per-view that Vince he didn't fine him or nothing. He just gave him $100. He said, I'd have made more just on a TV night because you get $200 on a TV night just for showing up. And he said he didn't even get that. He got $100. I said, wow. So, and Wolfie didn't have, and Wolfie got $100. and Wolfie didn't have anything to do with it. He was already there, but he got penalized because of Wolfie's actions. So you need to call him, and that would be one podcast I'd have to listen to.
Would you fancy doing the interview?
Oh, I could do the interview, but because I know a lot of things to ask him. He's too much. But he's got the most illegitimate kids that I know of. And I'm saying 12. It may not be 12, but it's close to it. Maybe more. I don't know.